the Mongol Empire, a name that echoed terror across continents, leaving burning cities and shattered civilizations in its wake. They had conquered lands from China to Persia, from Russia to Eastern Europe, crushing every kingdom that dared to stand in their path. Yet, in the distant south, there stood one city that made even the Mongols hesitate: Delhi, the glittering heart of India's wealth and trade. And in the year 1299, at the fields of Kili, a fierce clash unfolded. War elephants thundered forward, courageous cavalry charged, and the unwavering resolve of the Delhi Sultanate faced off against history's most feared conquerors. This wasn't just a battle. It was the moment the Mongols first learned to fear India, and a turning point that would help shape the fate of an entire subcontinent. In the mid-13th century, the great shadow of the Mongols loomed over Eurasia. Under the hooves of their steel horses, cities that had once shone with gold and incense quickly turned to ruins. The names that had once made Persia and Central Asia proud, Urgench, Merv, Nishapur, Herat, were reduced to dust and wailing. Historians estimate that Genghis Khan's campaign in Persia in 1222 alone claimed nearly 6 million lives, equivalent to 1.5% of the world's population at the time. A terrible number for an era without weapons of mass destruction. For the Mongol army, war was not just about pillaging, but the art of spreading terror to paralyze the will to resist. They wanted more than just conquering territory. They wanted to erase the memory of their enemies, destroy temples, libraries, and traditions, so that the very name of Mongol became a threat worse than death. At that time, the geopolitics of Eurasia was in unprecedented turmoil. The Mongol Empire was divided into 4 mighty khanates: the Great Khanate of Karakoram, the Ilkhanate of Persia, the Golden Horde of Russia, and the Chagatai Khanate, which stretched from Central Asia to the borders of India. In the west, Mongol pressure was causing Muslim dynasties to disintegrate, forcing Byzantine and Eastern European principalities into desperate defenses. In the east, the Song dynasty in China was entering its final stages before being completely annexed. Meanwhile, the Indian subcontinent was still divided between dozens of Hindu states, emerging Muslim dynasties, and proud Rajput lords. Amidst this complex puzzle, the Delhi Sultanate emerged as a new center of power, a young but ambitious Muslim empire. Established after the conquests of the Ghurid dynasty and succeeded by slave dynasties, the Delhi Sultanate controlled much of northern India, but its borders were always porous, threatened by Rajput rebellions and surprise attacks from the north. And then, when the Iron Storm looked south, it saw Delhi, a city renowned not only for its wealth, but also for its strategic position. Situated on the Yamuna River, Delhi was a trading hub connecting Central Asia, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and beyond. India's breathtaking muslins, shimmering silks, fragrant spices, and precious metals reached as far as Egypt, Persia, and even Europe. In return, caravans brought war horses, exquisite weapons, and luxury goods. To the Mongols, who had no cities, no fields, and lived only on horses and the art of war, Delhi was the alluring pearl of the south. But their ambition was not limited to plundering as before. This time, they wanted to place the Chagatai Khanate's insignia on the crest of Delhi's flag, turning it into a prefecture of the empire that had once made the world tremble. That was the beginning of a battle that few expected, an unequal battle between the famous Mongol army that had conquered half the world on one side and the Delhi Sultanate, a dynasty that had just overcome a crisis, still fractured, but resilient. The Delhi Sultanate was an empire built in the heart of multi-religious and multi-ethnic India. Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, and Jainism coexisted, but also caused society to be divided by differences in caste, belief, and customs. The northern region of India was under the direct rule of the court, while the famous warlike Rajput states maintained their autonomy. Further away, lands such as Gujarat, Bengal, and Deccan always harbored the intention of secession, creating a fragile situation like pieces that were ready to fall apart when there was an external force. In this context, one name stood out: Ghiyas-ud-Din Balban. As a talented vizier under Sultan Mahmud Shah, Balban soon understood that paying tribute would only encourage the Mongols' greed. He chose to confront them head-on, and to do that, Delhi had to transform itself from a weak commercial center into a real fortress. Balban ordered the construction of a chain of fortified forts on the northwestern frontier, stone ramparts stretching from Lahore to Multan, Sunam, and Samana. Each fort was built on vulnerable ground, with thick stone walls, high watchtowers, and protective trenches. Rather than stop at defense, Balban reformed the army in a more proactive way, recruiting not only from the slave warrior class, but also from freemen, creating a force diverse in both origin and skill. A bold decision by Balban left a deep mark, accepting refugee warriors and generals from Central Asia, especially after the civil war between the Ilkhanate and the Golden Horde. They brought to the Delhi army valuable knowledge of cavalry tactics, short bow mounted on horseback, rapid counterattack techniques, and the art of ambush that had been the secret of Mongol strength. For the first time, Delhi had a force that understood how the enemy moved, attacked, and deceived. Among them were names that were rarely mentioned, but played a silent role. Commanders like Ulugh Khan, a Turkic man who had been exiled and became the mainstay of the Western defense, or former Karakitai commanders who had fled, passing on the secrets of organizing two-handed cavalry archers on horseback. They joined the Delhi army, carrying with them both the pain of losing their country and the thirst for revenge, turning the northwestern frontier into a living Great Wall. Of course, the road was not paved with victories. In 1285, when the Mongols launched a major attack on Punjab, Balban's own son, Prince Muhammad, was killed in a fierce counterattack. It is said that Muhammad, in his early 20s, with a scholarly face but a spirit of steel, had charged forward to keep the soldiers' morale up and fell while urging his horse to counterattack. The loss became an everlasting pain in Balban's later years and in the memories of the Delhi court. But at the same time, it also affirmed a truth. Delhi was no longer afraid of the Mongol horses and was willing to pay the price to protect every inch of land. When Balban died in 1287, he left the Delhi Sultanate a solid legacy: a defense system of interlocking fortresses, an army that knew how to blend nomadic cavalry tactics with fierce fighting spirit, and a philosophy of active defense. The Delhi Sultanate before 1299 was still a shield full of cracks, internal divisions, long and difficult to control borders, and never-ending conflicts with the Rajput states. But hidden behind that was an iron will, forged by loss, experience, and determination to protect a brilliant cultural capital. That seemingly fragile shield became the most solid wall, ready to stop the storm coming from the steppe, in the fateful battle called Kili just a few years later. While Balban had fallen to dust and the Delhi Sultanate was still trying to patch up the cracks in its power, in the far north, Dua Khan's ambitions were starting to burn brightly. Dua Khan, the head of the Chagatai Khanate, one of the four most powerful khanates that had been split from Genghis Khan's great empire, looked south with the eyes of a predator. There were two reasons why Dua Khan decided that he could not ignore this land. Firstly, the Delhi Sultanate was the gateway to the Indian subcontinent, a priceless treasure that had not yet been annexed by the Mongol Empire. On the trade routes that crossed the Indus River, carrying spices, muslin, precious stones, and even cultural knowledge, Delhi became the meeting point of East and West, a bait too tempting to look at and not swallow. Second, for Dua Khan, the south was the only direction in which the Chagatai Khanate could expand without clashing with its brother Khanates, such as the Ilkhanate in Persia or the Golden Horde in Russia. A conquest of India would not only bring gold and silver, but would also cement Dua Khan's prestige among the descendants of Genghis Khan, affirming that he was the one who continued to carry the breath of the wolf to the south. This ambition was not a rumor, but was proven by historical facts. In the late 1290s, Dua Khan repeatedly sent troops across the Indus River, attacking Punjab and the border strongholds of the Delhi Sultanate. Despite strong resistance, especially from the generals Ulugh Khan and Zafar Khan of the Delhi court, these failures did not deter Dua. On the contrary, they were more determined to eliminate the last obstacle on the way to Delhi. And then, in 1299, Dua Khan decided to strike the decisive blow. He sent Kutlu Khwaja, his son and most talented general, with the elite cavalry that had sown terror across the Central Asian steppe. But this time, unlike their previous short raids, the Mongol army did not burn or pillage along the way. Throughout the 6-month journey, they kept their formation intact, avoiding skirmishes along the borders of Multan and Samana, and bypassing small strongholds. When Kutlu Khwaja camped on the Kili plain, only 10 kilometers from Delhi, the news of the disaster spread to the capital like a monsoon. People from the villages along the Yamuna River panicked and rushed toward the city carrying livestock, property, and even prayers to the gods. In the blink of an eye, the bustling atmosphere of Delhi became a city of anxiety and anticipation. What was even more surprising was that Sultan Alauddin Khalji himself, the young king famous for his toughness and ambition, did not receive the news in time. It was only when the Mongols crossed the Indus and approached the Punjab border that he realized that Delhi was on the brink. According to the 14th century historian Isami, the Sultan had only 1 to 2 weeks to prepare for the decisive confrontation. Alauddin immediately sent urgent dispatches to his governors, asking them to mobilize cavalry and soldiers from all provinces to reinforce him. He set up a large camp near Siri on the banks of the Yamuna River, a strategic location to both protect the capital and quickly advance to Keeli to meet the battle. A heated debate took place in the palace. Some of his courtiers, notably Ala ul Mulk, his uncle and Kotwal of Delhi, advised him to choose the path of negotiation, offering gold and silver to avoid conflict. But Alauddin strongly objected. He believed that if he showed weakness, the people and soldiers would immediately lose faith, and a young king who had just won the throne by sword and spear could not let that image spread. If he retreated today, the whole world would consider him a coward. Finally, Alauddin made up his mind to go to war. He publicly declared that he would personally lead his army to Keeli, to face head-on the army that had once spread terror to half the world. Before setting out, Alauddin left Ala ul Mulk to guard Delhi, entrusting him with the most important task. Only the winner would be given the keys to the palace. And in case of defeat, Ala ul Mulk closed all the city gates, leaving only the Badon Gate as an emergency retreat route to the Doab region. In the late autumn of 1299, the atmosphere on the Keeli Plains, just 10 kilometers from the capital Delhi, was as heavy as lead. 2 armies, 2 civilizations, and 2 opposing ambitions were facing a life-or-death moment. On one side of the battle line was the Mongol cavalry commanded by Kutlug Khwaja. some 50,000 to 60,000 elite horsemen, divided into three wings. On the left wing, General Hijlak. On the right wing, Tamar Buga. And in the front, Kutlug Khwaja himself commanded. Behind, a special force of about 10,000 troops lay in ambush, led by Targi, ready to strike a fatal blow when the Delhi army was caught off guard. This army set out from Central Asia, crossed Bactria, followed the Kabul River Valley, then crossed the northwestern border of India, advanced through Multan and Lahore, avoiding the strong fortresses, traveling along the ancient Multan-Delhi road, before setting up camp at Kili, only about 10 kilometers from Delhi. The objective was to strike straight from northwest to southeast, shortening the distance and threatening the capital. On the remaining front line was the Delhi Sultanate army under Sultan Alauddin Khalji. About 70,000 troops, including cavalry, infantry, and especially 700 majestic war elephants equipped with iron armor, hooks, and wooden towers. Alauddin arranged the army into three parts. The center was commanded by himself, the left wing was assigned to Nusrat Khan, the right wing was assigned to Zafar Khan, a famous, brave, and stubborn general. In front of the center was the vanguard of Akat Khan, while in the rear, Ulush Khan held the reserve force to support when needed. The war elephants were arranged in the front line, like a living wall to block the direct attack from the Mongol cavalry. Unlike previous times, this was no longer a lightning raid. Kutlug Khwaja came here to conquer, not to plunder and retreat. But even with the confidence of the Mongol cavalry, they understood. Breaking through the Delhi defense line, penetrating the war elephants and elite troops to capture the city was an unprecedented challenge. The confrontation began in tension. Sultan Alauddin gave an absolute order. No general was allowed to leave his position, no pursuit was allowed. If he violated, he would be beheaded. He knew that the Mongols were proficient in the tactic of false retreat, a feint to lead the enemy army away from the main force, then using cavalry to ambush and cut off the way back. Throughout history, countless armies had been destroyed by this tactic. But on the battlefield, courage is sometimes stronger than reason. Zafar Khan, known as the living sword of Delhi, was eager to prove his prowess. When the Mongol left wing under Hijlak pretended to retreat, Zafar Khan led his troops in pursuit. Initially, he kept his formation tight, but when he saw the enemy continuing to flee, he advanced nearly 50 kilometers, too far for the main army to support him. It was at this moment that Kutlug Khwaja set the trap. Targi's ambush troops appeared from both flanks, blocking Zafar Khan's retreat. Realizing his mistake, Zafar Khan did not retreat. According to contemporary records, he gathered only about 1,000 cavalrymen who were still fit to fight, vowing to fight to the last breath rather than turn back and suffer humiliation. A deadly battle broke out in the red dust. Zafar Khan and the Delhi soldiers fought like cornered tigers. Despite the enemy's many-fold superiority, they killed about 5,000 Mongol cavalrymen, an astonishing number considering that this was only 1,000 pursuers. Kutlug Khwaja even ordered a halt, inviting Zafar Khan to surrender to save face, promising to take him to the Chagatai Khanate as an honored guest. But Zafar Khan refused, considering surrender an unwashable humiliation. In the end, Hijlak, the general commanding the left wing of the Mongols, himself shot an arrow through his armor, ending Zafar Khan's life. It is said that he fell next to his broken horse, still clutching the hilt of his sword. Zafar Khan's death was a heavy blow to the morale of the Delhi army. Surprisingly, however, Sultan Alauddin's main force stood firm. War elephants formed a wall, and the cavalry and infantry held their ranks, not being pulled out of formation. Kutlug Khwaja, having lost a significant portion of his men to a prolonged ambush, hesitated to strike a decisive blow. The two sides faced each other in tense combat for the next 2 days, with only minor skirmishes on the flanks. By the third night, the Mongol army had quietly retreated from Kili, bitterly disappointed. For the first time, their invincible hooves had failed to penetrate the defenses of a southern city. On the Kili plain, the blood of Delhi soldiers like Zafar Khan stained the ground. But in return, the Delhi Sultanate held its fortress, and, more importantly, retained the belief that the Mongols were not invincible gods. This was the turning point, the first battle that made the Mongols fear Indian resistance, and it was also the beginning of their successive defeats on this land. When the plains of Keeli were reduced to the remains of horses, broken spears, and the iron smell of dried blood, the Mongol army retreated silently northward. Kutlug Khwaja carried the bodies of thousands of his elite cavalrymen with him, the price of a failed ambition. And for the first time since crossing the Indus, their hooves left India without leaving behind a burnt city, a plundered treasure, or a ruined court. But the war was not over. Dua Khan, who still dreamed of conquering Delhi, refused to accept defeat. 3 years later, in 1303, he sent an army of 120,000 cavalrymen straight toward Delhi, determined to raze the city and completely crush resistance. However, Sultan Alauddin Khalji, having learned the lesson of Keeli, turned Delhi into an impregnable fortress. He built the Siri citadel with thick stone walls, deep moats, and dense defensive mounds. Around the capital, the people were ordered to dig trenches, destroy bridges, and erect barricades. When the Mongols arrived, they found only a solid wall, with the people and the army retreating deep inside. 2 months of grueling sieges, food shortages, and disease gradually destroyed the morale of the Mongol cavalry. Finally, they withdrew, exhausted and disappointed. In 1305, the Mongols tried again. This time, 50,000 men crossed the border, hoping to catch Delhi off guard. But Alauddin was no longer the newly crowned sultan of old. He sent General Malik Nayak with 30,000 to 40,000 cavalry, using tactics of surprise and relentless pursuit, reducing the once fearsome army to tired, disoriented cavalry groups that were eventually largely annihilated. The final blow to Mongol ambitions came in 1306, when Dua Khan launched another full-scale campaign. This time, Alauddin's most talented general, Malik Kafur, led the Delhi army right in the Mongols' path, intercepting them at the Ravi and Nagaur rivers. The Mongols were surrounded, losing thousands of men, and were forced to flee India, never to return. Had Delhi fallen, India's fate would have taken a very different path, a much darker and more tragic one. The Mongol Empire, renowned not only for its military might but also for its ability to destroy any civilization that opposed it, would have repeated the same pattern it had sown in Persia and Central Asia. Delhi's magnificent temples, including its Islamic complexes, the Sultan's Palace, and the still unfinished Qutb Minar, would have been burned, smashed, or reduced to rubble. The royal libraries and archives, the repository of knowledge from the Persian, Arab, and even Indian worlds, could suffer the same fate as the Baghdad Library, reduced to ashes, taking with them centuries of medical, astronomical, mathematical, and literary knowledge. The population of Delhi, and the more prosperous Gangetic Plain more broadly, could be drastically reduced by mass massacres, a Mongol stamp that plagued Nishapur, Herat, and Merv, each of which saw hundreds of thousands of lives cut short in a matter of days. The urban population, merchants, artisans, and scholars, would be either killed or enslaved, leading to economic and cultural collapse. The breakdown of central authority would also cause the Indian subcontinent to become seriously fragmentation. The small dynasties of Bengal, Deccan, and Gujarat would lose their footholds and become vulnerable to further Mongol or other foreign invasions. The burgeoning vein of Indian Islamic architecture could be severed. Monuments such as the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque, the Sultan's Tomb, and the minarets that bear witness to the power of the Delhi Sultanate might be lost to history or lost to memory. Moreover, the fall of the Delhi Shield would open the way for the Mongols to advance deep into the Ganges Basin and beyond, threatening Hindu cultural centers such as Varanasi, Mathura, Ujjain, and shattering the Indian social and religious fabric that had existed for millennia. The name of Zafar Khan, who dared to risk his life to challenge the hooves of the Mongol horses, became a living symbol of sacrifice, referred to by later generations as the living sword of Delhi. Meanwhile, Sultan Alauddin Khalji, thanks to this battle, consolidated his prestige and power. He was remembered not only as a cold and decisive king, but also as a man who understood that to defend Delhi, it was necessary to rely on iron discipline, solid fortifications, and an uncompromising will. After the victory at Kili, the Delhi Sultanate entered a period of reconstruction and consolidation. Alauddin built Siri, the most fortified fortress of its time, expanded the army, and reformed taxes to maintain an unprecedentedly strong standing force. When we look back at the Battle of Kili in 1299, we see more than armies clashing on an open field. We see a city that refused to bow, a young sultan who chose defiance over fear, and warriors like Zafar Khan, who proved that courage could slow even the mightiest of invaders. It wasn't just Delhi that was saved that day. It was a civilization's soul, its libraries, temples, markets, and memories, all spared from the fire that had consumed so many other cities before. And it stands as a timeless lesson. Even the strongest empire can falter before the unyielding will of those who refuse to surrender. If this story touched you, please help us keep the flame of history alive. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell. Not just so we know you're here, but so that tales of courage and sacrifice continue to be told, not forgotten. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history, and see you in the next story.